Hey everyone, Clio here and welcome to part 5 of 5, I'm guessing. So this whole series, this whole Unhaul series started with me planning 3 videos, then it became 4 and now it's 5. That's the same number that I'm holding, but whatever. But so I think this is going to be the final one in which I'm going to be looking through these shelves, looking at the books that I've already read and also unhauling from them. I don't specifically need to be super strict on myself because I do still have space on my bookshelves, but I do want to make a little bit more room probably because I do prefer to maybe be able to turn the book to showcase its cover, for example, or be able to put a plant in there in some places, for example. So I do plan to unhaul stuff, you know. I definitely know of some that I already want to unhaul. By the way, as well, because of the whole festive atmosphere, this video being out in December, I'm not taking off my slippers, but you will hear them jingling. Hopefully the camera is catching that while I'm moving around, so that's what that is. But so let's address the elephant in the room first, and that would be the Harry Potter series. But I will still hang on to this one because it is such a big part of my childhood and I feel like I need more time to decide on it, you know. It's a journey, progress is being made. So it's not happening this year, sorry guys, but maybe one day. It's definitely a possibility that I'll do it one day. But so, apart from Harry Potter, let's just dive into that version. The top shelf I'm not going to... I should probably look at some point, but it's like non-fiction and it's got like it's mainly got travel books on there, so I'm just gonna keep that one as it is. But let's start with the classics over here. So these 3 shelves more or less are my classics, and I already know one that needs to go from here. So from the first shelf I'm getting rid of the complete novels of Jane Austen because I have all of them here. And I will actually also get rid of some extras because I have ugly editions of some Jane Austens because I wanted individual editions of Jane Austen. But I do also have annotated versions of some of them. And so I don't see myself reading these ugly versions, I'm sorry. So Persuasion and Pride and Prejudice are going because I have annotated versions. So I have a little bit of a debate between these 2 versions of Sense and Sensibility. So this is the first Austen I ever read, Sense and Sensibility. I had to read it for university in this copy. And it has some sentimental value and I actually like the floppiness of it as well and the font of it. But I do know that the ink on those pages can sometimes get on your hands and stuff like that. But I think I prefer to keep this version for the time being than the Dover Thrift edition. Eventually I want to get them all in this annotated version. But so yeah, that's it for the first shelf. My first shelf has definitely the Maurier, a couple of separate books, mostly Dickens and mostly Austen. I'm keeping all my Dickens, I'm keeping all my Austen. Dickens because I want to reread some of those because I have such bad memory and I want to compare like the Dickens that I've read and make a ranking, but I always forget about them, so I really should be taking notes more when I'm reading a Dickens, I guess. I say that now when I'm almost done with another Dickens and I haven't taken a single note. By the way, this is a very rambly video, I'm sorry for that. Next shelf. So I got some Jules Verne, keeping my Jules Verne. Theodore Dreiser's Sister Carrie, keeping that one. Frankenstein, keeping it. Washington Square, don't really have any association with that one. And my classics shelves, well, they do still have room, but... So Washington Square by Henry James, getting rid of that one. Tess of the D'Urbervilles, I am inclined to reread it, but I will be very critical when I reread it. I know that I gave it a very low rating when I first read it, but that's also just because it wasn't the type of book I was enjoying at that time, so we'll see, maybe I've changed. King Lear by Shakespeare, I'm sorry, Shakespeare is just not for me. Mrs. Dalloway, The Great Gatsby, The Secret Garden, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Jane Eyre, The Tenant of Whitehall Hall, those can all stay. Peter Pan, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, don't really have anything associated with it. This is an unread book. This is also an unread. Why are they all? I think those are all unread. This is also unread. Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. So this is the Dutch version that I had to read at university, and I think that if I want to reread it, I want to read it in English. I also hate this cover and this version. It's yeah, I'm gonna get rid of this one. One that I've been waiting for, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Getting rid of it. It's a book that I only have negative associations with, and every time that I see somebody picking up it, I'm like, no, save yourself. Dracula by Bram Stoker, keeping it. Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, keeping it. Why is this not with my other Jules Verne? I don't know, maybe I was going for the like Green Penguin collection together, but you know, my sense and sensibility is also there. So Jules Verne can go with Jules Verne. And then we have a very few here. So we have Anna Karenina, which I'm definitely keeping. Then we have War and Peace, definitely keeping it. And then these are a bit problematic, I guess, because these are my university books. So this is the Norton Anthology. I don't know whether in other countries this is the same, that you read these chunkers when you're studying English, but I mean, I haven't read them all, you know. This class I only took half of the class because I was in Spain on Erasmus for the other half of it. So we only read the sort of pages that are marked here, but so we didn't read this entire thing, you know. It's a sampler basically. Alright, so we've gone through the classics and I've gotten rid of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and the complete works, and nice progress on the classics, I think. Definitely also think that I have a little bit more room there now. This is gonna keep on falling, right? Okay. So moving on to the Asian literature and the Spanish literature. So I have a lot of Dutch versions of Murakami here as well, but I'm gonna keep them for the time being. So I'm keeping all of my Murakamis. Before the Coffee Gets Cold, damn right that I'm keeping that one. Housekeeper and the Professor, Convenience Store Woman, Traveling Cat Chronicles, Dear Friend from My Life, I Write to You in Your Life. Didn't particularly like this one, so this one is also going. Then, this I haven't read yet. Life for Sale by Yukio Oshikawa. Ow, ow. This is not smart. Life for Sale, I read this in the beginning of this year. It was fine, but I don't think I'm gonna hold on to it. It's one of the rare like Japanese pieces of Japanese literature that didn't blow me away. It's weird. It's definitely something to try if you like Murakami, but it didn't really do. I don't know what it is about Murakami that works better for me than this one, but this didn't really do much for me. And then we have Snowflower and the Secret Fan by Lisa C, keeping it for the time being. And then I am gonna get rid of Jesus. And then I am gonna get rid of Memoirs of a Geisha. So this is the Dutch version. I love this movie, but I also know how problematic this book is. So this is basically the author of this, Arthur Golden, basically interviewed the woman who inspired this story, and he told her story afterwards in this book, but he never really got her consent to tell this story. And apart from that, I also think it's just like a Western, it's an Asian story told through a Western lens, told through a Western author. He is getting all of the credit for this story, so it's also just one that I know that I'm never going to reread, so I'm getting rid of this one. Alright, moving on to the shelf that you probably can no longer see. But so, out of these ones, so that shelf contains like childhood favorites. It has some of the other books that got me into reading besides Harry Potter. I'm keeping all of those. I am a bit like, I'm considering getting rid of some books because there is a book there that I personally didn't really, it's personally not a childhood favorite, but I did my thesis on it. I did like compare this childhood book to 2 English translations that were made off of it to kind of look at the way in which it was translated. So I'm keeping that and the English versions for it for the time being because they really don't take up much space. But will I ever? Probably not, because I also don't really remember too much about that thesis, to be honest. So it doesn't really have a special place in my heart, but for the time being I'm keeping it on there. Then we have a lot of new books mainly. This is mainly the shelf where the books that I've just acquired land on, because that's the only spot that I had at that time. So I'm only gonna get rid of... So there are only like 4 books on that shelf that I've actually read, apart from those childhood ones. And so I am getting rid of The Year Without Summer by Guinevere Glassford. This should actually be in my first video in the series. It probably will be in there as well, so this is a repeat. Sorry. So yeah, I read this year, liked it just fine, and I will keep my eye out for more by her. I liked the theme of it a little bit more. I loved what it was looking into. I was very fascinated by the event it was looking into, but the story itself was a little bit mediocre. Alright, at the bottom shelf, yeah, probably I should also get rid of some of those. Alright, out of my bottom shelf I am keeping some books on there, but I am getting rid of Montana Sky, what I did for Duke, and The Dangerous Lord. So these are all romance books. I had a big romance period, but I basically read like 99.9% of my romances in ebook format, and if I want to, I still have most of those ebooks available to me. So if I want to reread a romance at some point, or if I feel like a romance, I might just do it like that. But I've definitely been steering away from romance because it's just like a for me personally, it's just like meaningless entertainment, and I personally don't get enough out of that. I'm somebody who needs to be enriched by what I'm reading. I need to be getting something out of it in terms of like a critical enjoyment and engagement with my mind and things like that. So I also, for example, don't watch reality TV almost. There are very few cases in which I've watched reality TV, for example, and so even though I can watch an episode of something like Temptation Island here in Belgium, and I can enjoy the episode, I will afterwards just feel like that was a waste of my time. And for me personally, I have that same thing with romance. I thoroughly appreciate and support the message of you can read things just for entertainment. But for me, something needs to be more than just entertaining for me to actually be happy about what I've spent my time on, you know? So while I can enjoy these while I'm reading them, and definitely get a bigger sense of enjoyment out of a book that I've enjoyed but also felt like was doing something new, was doing something that I haven't seen before. Whereas with romance, they all kind of bleed into one after a while, for me personally. So I don't see myself rereading this at any point. They've been there for like ever since I moved here without me actually touching them. And then the other one that I'm getting rid of is The Rosy Result. I'm for the time being keeping The Rosy Project and The Rosy Effect. But yeah, I didn't like The Rosy Result. I will say that I've heard not great things about The Rosy Project in hindsight, which I didn't know when I first read them. And then back there we also have Loveless and Clapping You Land, which I'm definitely keeping, and hopefully I can move them up to the color scheme where they belong. But so, the first one I'm getting rid of is Uncommon Type by Tom Hanks. I don't dislike this book, but I also don't think I'm going to be rereading it anytime soon, so I'm just going to get rid of it because it's just taking up space. Sorry, Tom. Next, If on a Winter... No, not on a... Jesus, what did I just almost say there? Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. If on a Winter's Night, A Traveler by Italo Calvino is one of my favorite books, but I did not like Invisible Cities by the same author. So I'm getting rid of this one. It's no use hanging on to one by an author you love just because I cannot even say that I love this author, you know. I loved one other book by this author at this point. What else do I have back there? So Extremely Loud and Perfectly Close, keeping it. Stoner, keeping it. Magic Strings of Frankie Presto, keeping it. Queenie, keeping it. Lost Children Archive, keeping it, I guess. Fall on Your Knees. I know I loved that book when I read it for university, but will I ever read it again? No, it does sound pretty good. So it says, following the curse of the 20th century, Falling Your Knees takes us from haunted Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia through the battlefields of World War I into the emerging jazz scene of New York City and immerses us in the lives of 4 unforgettable sisters. I'm hanging on to it. Alright, so the 5 people you meet in heaven. I don't think I would like it if I reread it, but I'm keeping it for the moment. The Handmaid's Tale, definitely keeping it. The Alchemist is kind of a sad story where I loved it as a child, and I've been thinking about rereading it for a very long time, and I finally bought it, and then I reread it, and I'm like, okay, it's mediocre, but I'm keeping it because it's really such a recent purchase at the moment. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, keeping it. Girl, Woman, Other, keeping it. 1,000 Splendid Suns, keeping it. Wolf Hall, keeping it for the time being. I am not in love with it the way that a lot of people are, but I do want to continue on with the series, which I'm going to be listening to on audiobook. So when I finish that series, I will decide on that book. Moving on to the blue books. So, why did I say blue so weird? We have Waiting for the Barbarians by Kutsi, keeping it. The Luminaries by Eleanor Catherine. I read it. I did not particularly enjoy it. The Chimes by Anna Smale, like it. Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. This is a book that I, as a teacher, had to teach quite a lot of times, and that I enjoyed a lot when I read it. But I have heard I heard bad things about it, because basically this deals with a boy who seems to have autism, seems to be autistic, and he, I think his parents split up or something, and he's going to on a journey to find his mother or something. It's very vague to me at this point, but I really definitely loved this book when I read it the first time. But basically, apparently the author does not consider this autism representation, and he also did zero research into autism, but then it was constantly marketed as like the big autism book, the big book about autism. So it definitely has a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth right now, and it's also one of those books that I'm never going to reread. So if I'm never going to reread it and it has a negative implication, then I'm just gonna get rid of it. Yes, cats cannot believe that I'm doing that apparently. Where was I? Okay. Another thing that I'm going to be critical on is Margaret Atwood. So I have a lot of Margaret Atwood on my shelves because I did my bachelor paper on her, and like on one of her books, and I read a whole lot of her books for that bachelor paper, but I didn't like a lot of them, or they didn't stick into my mind. So Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood is one of those. Yes, The Maltese Falcon. I had to read it for university, but as you all know, I don't like detectives. This has become like, I need to keep some books on these shelves as well, you know. The World According to Garth, keeping it. Into the Wild, keeping it. These are unread books. In the Country of Man, keeping it. Need some more blue books to keep this all afloat. Lolita. Whatever. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. I'm gonna keep it, but I want to reread it because I think I enjoyed it at the time, or I gave it quite a high rating at the time. But it sounds very problematic, and a lot of people I see reading it these days find it very problematic. So I definitely want to see if it's just something where I was. So I definitely just want to see if it's something where I was kind of ignoring problematic elements just because it is considered a great book of literature, or whether it is indeed something that I found something in to enjoy. So I'm keeping it for the moment. Boy in the Striped Pajamas, I'll also keep it. I don't think I'll ever reread it, but yeah, it's a beautiful book. I need a sort of like big blue book to keep this all up. Room by Emma Donoghue, keeping it. Moral Disorder by Margaret Atwood, going. Perfect by Rachel Joyce, keeping it. The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood is considered one of her better works, so I'll keep it for the time being. It will hopefully also keep these books up. Unread book, The Time Traveler's Wife. I'll keep it for the time being. So on some of these I might change my mind later. Need to refill this shelf clearly afterwards because that shelf is never going to stay up. I feel like everything is moving around me. I hear things falling all the time. But so let's move on to the black and white shelf. So we have The Night Circus, keeping it. The Plot Against America, I enjoyed it, but I'm not going to reread it. It's nothing spectacular for me. All the Lights We Cannot See. I rated this highly, but I also feel like I didn't like it. So, what do I do with those types of books? Am I ever going to reread it? No. So, bye. Life Before Man by Margaret Atwood. Jesus, this is really a big on-haul at the moment. Lanny by Max Porter, keeping it. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, keeping it. Everything is Illuminated, keeping it. Grief is a Thing with Feathers by Max Porter, keeping it. The Year of the Flood by Margaret Atwood, keeping it because apparently I gave it a 5-star rating when I read it, though I don't remember anything about it. Oop. The White Ones. This is an unread book. Here I Am by Saffron Foer, keeping it. Beloved by Toni Morrison, keeping it. On the Road by Jack Kerouac, keeping it for the time being. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, keeping it. These are unread books. The English Patient, keeping it. The Tent by Margaret Atwood. This is the collection that I did my thesis on, keeping it. Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer, keeping it. The People in the Trees by Jaime Yanagihara. Might want to reread it at some point because I remember not really liking it. But I do love her other books. So, and His Bloody Project by McCrae Burnett, keeping it. Alright. Next up, yeah, I'll do my reorganizing afterwards. So, haven't read that one, haven't read it one. A Little Life by Jaime Yanagihara, staying. Everything Under by Daisy Johnson, staying. Lord of the Rings, staying. The Hunger Games trilogy. Will I reread them? No. Did I like them? Yes. So keeping them for the time being. The Tale of Sir Benfro by J.D. Oswald, keeping it. Fantasy series by dragons that I don't hear a lot of people talking about, so check it out. What do we have here? The Empire trilogy. So starting with The Daughter of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Jenny Woods, definitely keeping it. Brandon Sanderson, keeping it. Then we have, this is the maybe shelf, so a lot of this is going to be covered in the previous video in this series, so I don't know yet whether I'll keep those. But I think there are still some books on here that's, no, I'll just consider the whole maybe shelf for the maybe video. Then we have Cirque du Freak, the saga of Darren Shan by Darren Shan, the author. I love this series. I'm considering maybe switching. I'm considering maybe switching them for the English version at some point, because the Dutch ones are quite bigger and like I do like reading in English a lot more now, so maybe if I want to reread it, I'll reread it in English. Then we have the Black Magician trilogy by Trudy Canavan, keeping it. I have the sequel trilogy as my TBR, and then I'm going to get rid of 2 books that are probably going to be somewhat controversial. I'm getting rid of Game of Thrones and I'm getting rid of A Dance with Dragons Part 1. This basically was just gifted to me by my mother, who found it in like a little library somewhere and just brought it for me, but I hate having books split in 2. And yeah, Game of Thrones, I will still read it when the next book comes out, but I am not a die-hard fan of this series, and I definitely didn't like the first one. I think the second one kind of made me interested again. The third one is what sold me on this series, but then the fourth and the fifth, right? We already have 5. Fourth and the fifth I didn't necessarily like because they were split. They were basically like the same timeline but split across different characters, and I liked all the characters in one of those two and none of the ones in the other. So I don't have any particular need to hang on to Game of Thrones. I know, shocking. I know, I'm a fantasy fan and I'm getting rid of Game of Thrones. Then we have, the next shelf has 2 series on it. It has the Septimus Heap series on it by N.G. Sage, and it has a series of Unfortunate Events by Lemonade Snicket, which I'm gonna keep until I need the space, because they do take up quite a lot of space. I think if I'm gonna get rid of one of them, it's gonna be a series of Unfortunate Events, which I read all the way through this year, and I liked it just fine, but I don't have a sentimental, I don't have any sort of nostalgia for this series, so I think that there's also nothing keeping me from getting rid of it, you know. I liked it just fine, but I'm never gonna reread them, so when I need to space those, I can see myself getting rid of those. And then the bottom shelf has mainly Dutch books on it. And I'm getting rid of none of them. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna hold them up because they're not really interesting for the majority of you guys. But yeah, I only have 2 red Dutch. I only have 2 red Dutch. I only have 2 red Dutch books on there, and that's like Het Smelt by Lise Spit and Oorlog en Turpentijn by Stefan Drees. And yeah, I like those just fine. And then I have some Bill Bryson down there as well. I have the 2 of him that I liked. In some of the other unhaul videos you will have seen that I've gotten rid of 2 others of his. So another author that I have a hit or miss situation going on with. So moving on to final bookshelf. Top shelf has like some comic book series. It has The Scorpion. I don't know whether this is available in English or not. It's originally French, I think. And then I have Saga, the entirety, and then I have the illustrated Harry Potters, which I'm still keeping at the moment, and I actually also think that I'm probably still gonna get the 4th one for Christmas. And then I have some photo albums. And then this shelf, let's move on to Anthony Horowitz. So Anthony Horowitz, I read a whole lot of Anthony Horowitz in my childhood, and so I'm keeping the majority of those. But there is a series that, when looking back on my ratings, I gave quite good ratings, but I don't have any sort of sentimentality towards this series, and I actually don't consider it to be as good as his other works, so I'm gonna get rid of that series. Ooh, bookmark, didn't expect it. And so that would be which is the first one, the Power of 5 series by Anthony Horowitz. So I'm getting rid of this entirety, so it's a 4-part series, which, oh no, I think I just never got the 5th book. I did read it because I saw it when I was checking my ratings for the series, but I'm not going to keep this one. Definitely keeping A Monster Calls, and maybe I need to restock this shelf because I've never finished the Alex Rider series. It's actually still ongoing, I think, so maybe I need to continue with that. Then we have Stephen King. And so I have 3 Stephen Kings on there. I have Thinner on there, which is written as Richard Bachman, which is one of his pseudonyms. Then I have It on there, and then 11/22/63. I'm getting rid of It, probably. Didn't like it, will never put myself through that again. Oh, Jesus. That's a chunker. Okay, next bookshelf. So the Harry Potters, as I already addressed in the beginning. So what we have here is a book that I haven't read. Then we have Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I'm still not giving up on this one. I don't know what it is about it, but I really want to love this book. But I've read it twice and I just, like, my mind cannot follow what happens in this one. So maybe I'll give it another go. Like, it is supposed to be a trilogy at some point, so there is going to be sequels to this one. So when the next one is going to come out, I'll give this one another go. But if it doesn't work out, then I need to give this one up. And then we have Name of the Wind and the Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. If anything, I might just get rid of the Wise Man's Fear and get it in the small mass market version that I have the Name of the Wind in, but I'm definitely not doing that until the third one is there and until I figure out whether I actually like the third one. Because the second one was a big disappointment. You can see how tired I'm getting with this project, so let's move on. Next shelf is also it's solely fantasy, I think. So we have the Lord of the Rings, new box set that I got recently, definitely not getting rid of that. Fate of the Fallen by Calcade, keeping that. The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, keeping it. One that I haven't read, and then we have the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin and the Databed trilogy, or the first two, because the third one, it hasn't come out in this smaller edition yet, by S.A. Chakraborty, keeping all of those. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, keeping it. Piranesi, keeping it. Then I have the Bear and the Nightingale trilogy, which I will say I love the Bear and the Nightingale, but I didn't like the sequels. But I'm keeping it for the time being. The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle, definitely keeping it. Kiss of Deception, which is part of the Remnant Chronicles, I think, by Mary E. Pearson, keeping it. And then two books that I haven't read yet. Next shelf is mainly fantasy, but it has a few others on there for the time being. But we're getting rid of some of those. And that will be the Maze Runner trilogy. I think I liked it just fine, but it was kind of past the time in which I was really enjoying YA when I read this one. So I didn't have any sort of, I didn't imprint with this series, let's say it like that. Then we have the Sword, the Ring and the Cup, I think it is in English, which is sort of like a very traditional fantasy book. Like I feel like a lot of books in the 90s probably, or maybe 2000s, were very like had that whole sort of like medieval fantasy vibe and very common things to it. But I definitely did very much enjoy that series. And then you have my Dutch edition for His Dark Materials. I am gathering the illustrated versions at this point. So maybe once I have all the illustrated versions of that, I will transfer the Dutch version onto my sister, for example, see if she wants them, because she is a big fan of His Dark Materials as well, and she's actually getting the continuation series, which I haven't really shown an interest in yet. Then I have some unread books that I have. Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. I also still have the second one, which is unread, so I'm keeping Sleeping Giants. I want to reread it at some point and see if I make up my mind. I didn't dislike it, but I also didn't love it, so I haven't really felt an urge to dive into the second one, which I bought before reading the first one, so we'll see. And then I have The Gospel of Loki, keeping it. Another controversial one, Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman, I've only tried this book in all honesty, but it was really just like meh for me. And with people loving Neil Gaiman so much and loving this one in particular, and it had elements that should have made me love it. I love books set in London, so I love having that London as background and looking at like Harrods, for example, at some point in this scene in this book. But yeah, nothing really drew me into this one, and I just don't think Neil Gaiman's writing style is really for me. Didn't read this one, and then, oops. This is one that I liked when I first read it. I mean, I loved it when I first read it. It was very much like, I think it kind of combined what I love about it. I think it kind of combined this sort of fantasy setting that I absolutely love with this sort of like romance craving that I have a lot of the time. That was clearly starting to develop at that time, but I do acknowledge now that it's really not that original at all, and so will I ever reread it? No. I tried to get through this series, but I think I stopped at around book 5 or something, because they really started to just feel the same way. They were all alike. So I liked the first 2 ones really well. Like, I really loved the first 2 ones in the series, and then I just started to feel like, Jesus, when is this, like, when are we gonna get any sort of a progress into this story? It just feels like every story was more or less the same structure, you know, obstacles thrown in the way of this relationship. So it was also very romance heavy, which even though I had a big romance period in fantasy, I've come to realize that I don't really love it being heavy on romance. You know, the plot shouldn't be focused around romance. And yes, there is something else involved, but it felt to me like the main reason why we were still reading this was to see if these two characters are going to be able to get together at some point or not. So yeah, getting rid of that one. And a debate that I have with myself is whether to get rid of Priory of the Orange Tree, because there were things about this that I liked, there were things about it that I wanted to like, but I didn't really love this book at all because of the pacing. There was just something off about the pacing, and then some characters that I really liked we didn't explore enough. Some other characters I didn't particularly care about we did explore to quite some extent. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it in there for the moment because I know that there are some talks that she might continue on with this world at some point, so maybe at that point I want to reread it and give that other work a go. And then basically the shelves beneath that are basically almost empty of books. They have like my board games and they have like recipes and stuff in it, but there are a couple of books in there. So there are two Michael Crichton's there, so one that I absolutely love, which is Jurassic Park, one that I think is meh, which is Dragon Teeth. I'm keeping it for the time being. I don't despise them and I want to. But I'm keeping those for the time being. There's an unread Michael Crichton on there as well, and then there is The Lost Symbol by Dan Brown on there, which I'm also going to keep for the time being. So yeah, I've gotten rid of quite a lot. Let me count them. So I got rid of 39 extra books on my shelf. Of course, this is not a reduction of my physical TBR because all of these I had already read, but it's still nice to make progress on these shelves. Even though I didn't necessarily need the space, I also haven't gotten it as empty as I was kind of fearing at some point throughout this video. So I think it's good that I got rid of quite a lot of these. The only problem now is that I cannot really dump them anywhere, though maybe the secondhand bookshop is open because bookshops are in principle open, so maybe I can get rid of them, which would be perfect because I am accumulating a lot of books. I'm accumulating a lot of unhauled books and they're just all in my junk room somewhere. But so yeah, that's going to be it for my little unhaul series. So I hope you've been enjoying this series. I've definitely been enjoying having a little bit of a cleanse and the sort of boost of productivity it gave me about. And the sort of boost of productivity it gave me about my reading for this final track of the year, because let's be honest, I didn't really make a lot of progress in this final track of the year, but at least I was able to unhaul quite a bit. So yeah, see you guys for the next one. Bye.